Remember that phone game called Angry Birds that everyone used to play? Well, imagine if I were to tell you from playing that game years ago, you are now a more violent person. I would call BS too. My name is Grant Lewis, and I'm here to talk to you about the influences that nonviolent and violent video games have on children's aggression today, and how there's very little correlation there. The research paper that I'm going to be talking about is called "Do Angry Birds Make for Angry Children?" It is a meta-analysis of video game influences on children and adolescents' aggression, mental health, their pro-social behavior, and their academic performance. This is by Christopher Ferguson. Now, Christopher Ferguson got his PhD in psychology at the University of Central Florida. He's known for various studies on violent behavior in children and studying juvenile delinquents and stuff like that, and how he studies a lot about the research behind nonviolent video games and violent video games making children aggressive. So as of right now, he's a professor of psychology at Stetson University, and the relationship between non-violent video games and children aggression is very important for obviously young adults with children, young parents, and the government, because they need to know what to regulate and what not to regulate. What Ferguson did was look at all the people saying that violent video games do affect children aggression, and he looked at their data and he found that it was flawed and there's a lot of bias there. One example was a shooting, and at the Stony Brook shooting, a lot of people said the kid, 20-year-old Adam Lanza, was violent because of he played a lot of video games. But it wasn't violent. But he wasn't violent because he played a lot of video games. He's violent for other reasons. The National Rifle Association actually backed that up and said, "Hey, it's got to be because of the video games. It's not because of any other reasons, and guns are still safe." So, based off other studies, it is known that there is very little discrepancy between violent video games and non-violent video games. The competitiveness can be high in both, and the difficulty can be high in both. The frustration and the controls can be difficult in both, and there's really little difference between them when you really look at it. Ferguson also said that most of these experiments that said violent video games were having an effect, he found that a lot of them failed to pretest. Now they can't really compare truly if they didn't pretest. He also said that a lot did unstandardization. Now an example of unstandardization would be Taylor's competitive research. And now what Taylor's competitive research was is they took children and they had them play against an opponent, and they got to choose the opponent's punishment. And the punishment was they'd have to listen to a static noise if the children beat their opponent. And so the children got to pick how loud the noise was and the duration of noise. And since this was what their children were doing, they obviously were punishing the opponent, and that was what they're supposed to do. And researchers said it was kids were being aggressive, but really the experiment was unstandardized. Ferguson also argues that the third variable is often ignored in these findings. He says that without the third variable, the research is flawed because you have to factor in gender, male or female. Boys are usually more aggressive than females. You have to factor in their home life. Maybe their parents are more aggressive, taught them to be more aggressive, come from a tougher background. Maybe some don't. He also said that selective selective interpretation was a very big bias found in these studies, because what these researchers would do would gather the results and just pick out the one result that supported their prior hypothesis and didn't share the rest of the results. From diagnosing these experiments, Ferguson found that influence was practically zero, and from the meta-analysis, he found that whether nonviolent or violent video games, there's minimal to no influence on children. So, going back to the Sandy Hook shooting, the 20-year-old Adam Lanza he was playing a lot of video games. Yeah, that's true, but he was really playing DDR, Super Mario, and Mario Kart, and wasn't really playing violent video games. So don't be worried about Angry Bird or any video games. Let your kids play if they're of age, and that's that. Enjoy the violent video games if that's what you like. They have no influence. Thank you.